Hosda, Sinalei, and welcome. Alright, here we are today in January, this fine cold day outside where it's cloudy and freezing, and so we're doing our best to stay warm. And today, I hope you all are doing the same, staying warm, but at the same time, remembering to hold God in your heart. Alright, and in that line today, we are going to do a little examination and exploration of dysfunctional relationships in Genesis. So it's all about perspective. You know, when you read these texts, it's all about perspective. And so often too is our lives, our values, our beliefs, and our morals. It's all about perspective. And so let's do a little reading here. We're going to read from Genesis chapter 20, verses 9 through 21. Alright. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. Of course, here we're talking about Ishmael. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit along with my son Isaac." The matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is of your offspring." So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, but the distance of a bow shot. For she said, "Do not let me look on the death of the child." And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt, which of course is where Hagar was from originally. You know, the end of last fall, I kind of alluded to a little bit about we were going to get into some alternative perspectives on things here. You know, in our Indian religious tradition, we have many values and beliefs that we live by, including a code of ethics, a code of morals, and there are many aspects of that code. And you know. I talked earlier before, and I mentioned again in this book, The Sacred Tree, which you can find a photograph of, a couple of them of, on our website, that it has a summary of our morals, code of ethics that we live by in it, starting on page 74. This is Sacred Tree by Phil Lane Jr., Judy Bott, Michael Bott, Lee Brown, and elders. Number 11 is the one I'm referring to today. Number 11 is know those things that lead to your well-being, and those things that lead to your destruction. Well, that may seem like a pretty short and direct statement, which it is, and actually knowing these things is oftentimes very challenging for us. You know, in the reading we had today, God revealed, it says that God opened Hagar's eyes and she saw a well. So the spring of life was right there near her while she was in her turmoil, in her sorrow, in her grief. She was caught up in her pain of her life, so much so that she couldn't even see what was right there in front of her. And God helped her out. The question is, why did God have to help her out? Well, I'm in my third unit of clinical pastoral education at the VA hospital here in Muskogee. It's a residency I'm doing for chaplaincy, and we were talking about doing pastoral care and counseling using scriptural references. And of course, in today mainline North American society, that is controversial. Because in a lot of hospitals you're not supposed to reference any biblical text or any religious text for fear of offending someone. And yet at the same time, these texts are a wealth of knowledge and wisdom in understanding human behavior in the social environment. And one of the ways that I brought that up was in talking about, because of my background as a clinician, as a social work therapist, and domestic violence counselor, is looking at the relationships in Genesis and other books of the Bible from a healthy and unhealthy relationship perspective, a dysfunctional relationship perspective. And nothing stands out right off the bat than the story of Adam and Eve, and of course the story of Ishmael and Isaac, where we have Sarah and Hagar are the key figures in this story. If you go back and read the entire story, you can see how it begins. From the start, we see Hagar is an Egyptian woman who is a slave. She is the property of Abraham and Sarah, or Abram and Sarah, as they call themselves at the beginning. When the time comes and that Sarah discovers that she can't bear children, which unfortunately does happen, she invoked the custom of that time and in that region to take a slave woman and give her as wife to her husband so that they could have offspring. And basically, Sarah becomes the mom. And so that's what happened. So looking at right away, from an Indian religious perspective, that's not something that would have ever occurred to an indigenous person in North America to even consider. And so, we just never did that. Not that I'm aware of. But in this case, it creates a relationship dynamic right from the get-go that is dysfunctional, because in this situation, Hagar is not being treated with dignity and respect. She's not being treated as an equal. She's not being loved, valued, and wanted. She's being treated as property. And in our Indian religious tradition, that is abhorrent. It is unacceptable. And that's what happened. So it set the stage for what came next. And what came next was Hagar conceived, and she bore a child. And that made her have a little self-esteem. Hey, I could do what you couldn't do. So she had a little self-esteem, a little self-worth kick up, and maybe a little bit of arrogance came with it. If she was in bad situations, she was treated badly, she wasn't treated properly, and now she's got baggage. She's born a son to the head man. we got to pause for a minute here. What happened? Sorry for the interruption. Apparently we had a battery issue again. Okay, so we left off that Sarah and Hagar are having communication problems, relationship problems. Hagar is looking down on Sarah now, when originally Sarah was looking down on Hagar. And Sarah is not cool with that. So if you go back and read the story, you see that's where it's evolving. Now, Sarah's the one who's feeling offended. So she goes to God and says, hey, help me out. And God says, okay, this is what we're going to do. Sarah's going to conceive. She's going to have a child. And she did. You know what? This is where it gets rough. Because instead of Sarah and Hagar valuing each other, supporting one another, coming together, Sarah gets jealous. And she becomes abusive towards Hagar and Ishmael. Right or wrong, good or bad, that's what it shows. Sarah apparently decided she wasn't going to put up with competition. It was all about her and her son, and not about valuing all of the children, all the family. She became so abusive, so self-absorbed in getting her way, that she was willing to cast out Hagar and Ishmael into the desert to die. Seriously. Now, where's the love in that? I'm just asking. And as we look more into the story, we see it go even farther than that. This situation is so dysfunctional that Abraham is distressed over this. Abraham's like, what am I going to do? I got these two women with two kids. They're my kids. I can't just throw one of them out to die. And he didn't want to do it. It took God to intervene to fix this. And let me tell you, that's a biggie right there. I mean, well, you talk about intervention because, all the time that I've been doing pastoral care and counseling and social work, I have never known God to intervene in a domestic violence situation in my lifetime and, make something good come from it or fix it or do something about it. But God recognized that he had made a commitment, or God, Creator, had made a commitment to Abraham. And now he's in a situation where everything's falling apart. So Abraham is begging for help. God intervenes and says, don't keep the situation going as it is. We're going to go ahead and take Hagar, take Ishmael, send them along out into the wilderness, and I'm going to bless them both because they're the innocent ones. I'm going to make something good come from this. And that's what God does. And we see at some point where Hagar, who knows what was going on with her, but she got a little humility lesson there out in the desert about the importance in relying upon God. And there's another aspect of this too we have to look at, and many people tend to overlook. I've never heard anybody preach on this. We'll talk about this in any circles that I've been in before. And this is a big one, okay? God chose to speak to Hagar, the Egyptian slave girl. God chose to bless her son, who is Egyptian and descendant of Abraham. There's that mix going on. Of course, it goes with the dad. and to make a nation come from it. God made that commitment. God intervened in this situation to make something good come from it. This is where we get into self-sabotaging behavior. Let me tell you now, right here, you look at the relational dynamics of what happened here, and I can get into some really deep stuff here that would allow, I'd have to talk all morning long just about this relationship dynamic. You know, we're talking about triangulation, we're talking about, oh man, competitiveness, jealousy, at the core of their being, what kind of persons they are at the core of their being, whether or not they're truly loving people or selfish and self-serving people. So we're talking about a lot of stuff going on here. And it's going to take a lot of exploration, or examination and exploration to understand this. You're going to have to turn your imaginations on and get out there and do a little research on the dynamics here of what's happening. But let's suffice it to say that in this particular situation, they lack the knowledge and the tools to change, and the willingness to change who they were, to change their perspective, and become somebody different. Imagine what would have been happening in this world today if Hagar and Sarah had made peace and had chose to raise both sons together as brothers, as family. Imagine what would be going on in the world today if that had taken place. Because we know that Ishmael was the father of the Arab peoples. And we know that Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, the father of the Hebrew peoples. Imagine what could have been. So, this is where we look at our Indian religious tradition and look at, know those things that lead to your well-being and those things that lead to your destruction. Look how much pain and suffering has been brought upon the world because these two women couldn't get along with each other. I'm just saying. This is what I'm talking about. What we do, what we say, how we behave affects a lot of people for generations to come. So, when we look at that, we have to look at another resource. And I really encourage y'all to get this book I'm getting ready to name and to examine. Now, I'll be the first to say that I got issues with patriarchal Christianity, and I've got issues with how missionaries to North America have used Christianity as a weapon of oppression among indigenous peoples, not only in North America, around the world. Not trying to minimize what happened around the world. I live here, I'm focusing on here. Right here in Oklahoma, right here in the United States. Canada, Alaska, Hawaii, here, indigenous peoples. And so, when I think about role models from mainline Christianity in North America, or Christianity in general in North America, that has come out of the missionaries from Europe that came here, I don't find very many of them that I really consider to be role models. But one that I have been studying over the last couple of years and been getting into, I've mentioned his name before, is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I like him. And the name of the book is called Radical Integrity. The story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you can find it at Amazon.com or other places. I'm just saying, I have a hard copy. I apologize, I forgot to bring it. I was going to show it to you. But you can look it up. This is the gentleman who put principles first in his life, to the point where it cost him his life. He said it's not okay for Christians to be racist. And it was so important to him that he was willing to die in opposition to Christians being racist. And this week here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there is a conference going on among the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, workshop, about racism. President of the denomination, Reverend Dr. Sharon Watkins, came to Tulsa to kick things off. And her lecture was about basically the conversation that we need to be having about racism. Now, you all know that I am radically opposed to racism in North America among indigenous of any kind. And my lineage of being multi-nation, we know 3 nations plus African American, plus European, or Irish, Welsh, Scottish, something like that. But here in North America, we're descended of multiple nations, my family is. And so it's important that we get in touch with who we are, what we're about, and how we are supporting our well-being and how we are leading to our destruction. And there are a lot of dynamics, a lot of aspects of that, including generational trauma, poverty, social injustice, limited access to opportunity, limited access to resources. But mostly it's about making choices. We always have a choice. Many people like to believe that they are choiceless, that they are powerless to change. And I'm here to say that American Indians in North America always have a choice. And that choice is to open our hearts and our minds to our Creator and allow that voice within us to guide us in a good way, to listen to it, to honor it, in order to do what is best for everyone and not just ourselves, and in so doing promote our own well-being, or to choose to lead to our own destruction, to make choices like Sarah and Hagar, who led to, big stuff. A lot of pain and suffering throughout the world, throughout history. Here in North America, we have many people calling themselves Christians who are continuing to act out racism towards indigenous peoples. I have made many posts from Indian Country News onto our Facebook pages over the last few weeks, illustrating how racism in North America, especially now during this presidential election, is on the rise. And of course, I got my own feelings about that. The insanity, the extremism in presidential campaigning, in people who believe that they are morally superior and are concerned about getting their own power. They want to get their hands on real power. To do harm to others to get their way is scary, leading to destruction. What choices are you making in your life that are continuing to set yourself up for harm, sabotaging your own personal relationships, sabotaging relationships with your co-workers and colleagues, sabotaging your relationship with God, or enhancing it? What does it take to promote well-being? It takes healthy choices. It takes a willingness to look inside, to examine oneself, to see what are you doing that's sabotaging your success and well-being, what are you doing that's promoting it. And I'll be the first to tell you, I have a hard time being around people who are constantly sabotaging the success and well-being of my life and the lives of the people I care about and the communities that I'm striving to develop, be a part of. You know, it really just messes with me. Life is short. We all have issues, health-wise, whatever. We can do things to hurt ourselves. We can do things to help ourselves. So I encourage you to examine yourself, to do a little study, to do a little research, and to look into both individually and personally in your relationships and in your work towards God, whether or not you are promoting well-being of yourself as well as others, or if you are setting yourself up for more pain and suffering or causing harm to others, because then you're setting yourself up for your own destruction by God. Because God is not cool with people doing that kind of stuff. It's not okay to cause harm to others intentionally. Racism is intentional harm. Where is your radical integrity? Where is your radical willingness to change who you are to become the person God most wants you to be? Where is it? Walk in beauty. Whatever.